Welcome to the Going Beyond podcast. I'm Randy Zinn. I'm an entrepreneur, wellness expert, author, and the founder of the Going Beyond movement. I'm constantly exploring how individuals can make the most impact on a daily basis. And here's what I've learned. Your life is part of the change we want to see in the world. Your life is the movement. The work you do is that drop that causes that ripple effect of positivity. Let today's episode be part of your daily contribution toward change, the investment you make in yourself. Let it be the fuel you need to go beyond. If you're enjoying the Going Beyond podcast, consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. When you subscribe, our weekly episode arrives right onto your device on whichever platform you've subscribed from. We also appreciate 5-star ratings and reviews. Thanks so much for your support, friends. We're so glad you're hanging with us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's show. I'm so happy that you're spending time with me. This is my happy place where I feel like I get to give myself the gift of inspiring, soul nurturing conversations. And even better, I get to meet amazing women who 9 times out of 10 become a new friend. And so today's conversation is with someone who I've really yet to get to know, but I'm really excited to know. And I have a strong sense that what she has created is going to be a really, really special opportunity for us to learn about how to move toward our passions, our callings, and to make real impact on the world and where it's needed. I'm joined today by Sarah Symons. She is the founder and director of HerFuture Coalition, an international charity that has helped thousands of girls rise out of poverty and exploitation to become free and independent. HerFuture Coalition has been selected for a collaboration with Michelle Obama's Girls Opportunity Alliance, a campaign to promote and support education for the most vulnerable girls around the world. Over the years, the HerFuture Coalition has served tens of thousands of survivors in India, Nepal, Cambodia, and Thailand. Most exciting to Sarah is the fact that survivors who joined the program only a few years ago are now managing the programs, working as trainers and mentors to newly rescued girls. She could not imagine any future at all when they were living in brothels, and now their dreams are limitless. And that is truly what we would hope for any girl in the world. So Sarah is also, as I've just learned in our brief introduction to one another, a mother. I never avoid that part of the conversation, of 2 college-age young people, her son and her daughter, and she lives in Florida. So I'm really excited to get to know her. So welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Randy. I'm so excited to be here.
I would just like to say that we spend a lot of time on this show talking about healing, about resilience, and about the things that we learn through not only the things that we've personally been through, but also through the people that we somehow serve. Like everyone assumes that if you create something, you're giving something, but I think we all know that you receive so much in return. And I'm really excited to know more about you and about what brought you to stepping so full force into your commitment to girls around the world, far away from here, and to drastically improving their lives. It's a massive step. And I really love to understand more about where you've come from and how and why you've made this your mission.
Wow, there's so much in what you just said. I can't wait to dig into all of it. I guess I'll start at the beginning. How I got involved in it was extremely unexpectedly and a little reluctantly, perhaps initially, because I was on a completely different path. My kids were really little and I lived in Cape Cod. My husband was an investment banker and I had a job as a composer and performer of music for film and TV. In fact, mostly TV and mostly soap operas, and almost always the love and death scenes of soap operas, because that's what my music was kind of all about.
I have to tell you, Tell you, Sarah, I did not expect you to say any of that. I'm laughing because I'm like, this is the beauty of life. Like you can be writing music for soap operas and somehow end up doing what you're doing now. So just a note to listeners, like your life can take many paths.
It really can. And I seriously thought, Randy, I was like, I am on this path. Like I am pursuing my music. It was already my second, chapter because I had done music. I was in a band and, toured around the country and had a record deal and did that for like most of my 20s and into like just in my early 30s. And then I, was tired of being, in a bar at 3 a.m. and being the oldest person there. So I was like, let's have a new chapter. And I wanted to have a family and, it wasn't suitable with the lifestyle I had. So then I, got into songwriting, which was fantastic. It was like a way to use the same passion and talents and also be able to have the family life that I was ready for at that point. So when I got that going, I was like, this is great. I am on this path. These kids are tiny. I'm like consumed with all this stuff. And, we're doing great, like moving forward and, very like kind of, I'm always very monofocused. So I really wasn't expecting this next complete transformation into something completely different. It just was not, in my playbook at all. But I think part of it, what came out of it was my mother had died and she was pretty young. She was 60, not even 60. And she died very, very quickly of cancer, like just in 3 or 4 months. And she had come back from England. She'd been living in England where we're all originally from. And she'd come back to help me with when my daughter was born. And so we'd been like extremely close and, every day together with the kids. And it was magical. It was wonderful. And, lasted just a couple of years. And then she gets cancer and very suddenly, and for me, extremely traumatically died. And I was extremely grief stricken and also very overwhelmed now with these 2 little kids and deeply in my grief. And my kids were 2 and 1 when that happened. So I think the fact that this very tragic event had happened for me kind of, there's this Jewish saying that when your heart breaks, the words of God can fall in. You know that what I'm talking about, right? It's like,
oh my God. Sitting here having like a moment. So listeners, just so you know, Sarah and I are looking at each other on video. So she saw my face. So just to say, I also lost my dad very unexpectedly in an accident 15 years ago when he was 2 and I was 25. So immediately I'm resonating with one part of your story, which is that death and loss and trauma is transformational and will totally take you in another track of your life. So I'm feeling you there very deeply. And then the other part is when you just made reference to that quote, that was a quote that I lived by. And I read it in a book that my rabbi gave me that was all about a Jewish approach to healing and grief. And the quote, the way I always heard it or read it was, when your heart is broken, God floods in. But it's the same thing that you're saying. So that's amazing. We're already besties and it's happening. Go ahead.
What was the book?
I don't remember. Geez. It was about grief and loss, but it was from a Jewish,
perspective.
And
there's also this Rumi poem and it's the wound is where the light comes in and really, kind of saying the same thing. So for me, it really had been, it was because of that life-changing event that I think I was open to this life-changing, or transformational journey. And all these kind of crazy, miraculous things actually happened. Do you want to hear them?
Of course I want to hear about the crazy, miraculous things that happened.
I don't usually share them. It just feels like the right thing to do. So I'm going for it.
What happens here on this show, Sarah? Like crazy, miraculous things where guests say, I don't usually talk about this. Perfect.
Okay. We're all in, all of us together, your listeners and us, and we're going to eat. So what actually happened was it was my mother's birthday just a few months after she passed away. And you know what that's like, that first birthday, that first holiday. And so I thankfully had a babysitter because I would have been a crap mom. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So it was like a typical spring day in New England, like sheet rain and like super gray. And it was like, okay, perfect. This matches my very dark mood. And so I was just driving around Cape Cod and periodically I would just have to stop in some parking lot and cry. And I was just really just super down and really feeling like I wasn't making, any progress in recovering from my grief or moving through my stages in any way. So finally I stopped at in this one parking lot and I was, had been in the habit of talking to my mom every day after she died and before, and talking to God every day. But that day I was just feeling like so despairing, and I did like sort of mad at them and not wanting to talk to them and feeling kind of hopeless about it. So I decided to talk to another person who had died, which was a much older grief, and was a young man that I had worked with in a program for homeless youth that I worked at in New York City some years before. And he had been murdered at age 17. His name was Philip. So I was like, Philip, you've been up there longer, like put in a word for me, because this woman is just like going down. I'm just really not seeming to be able to work through this. And just talking to him immediately felt some relief. And, I went and got a donut, and that was all kind of a miracle in itself, just feeling it's going to be okay, just feeling that peace. But then when I got home, remember answering machines? I had one. This was like 18, 19 years ago. And on my answering machine was a message from my agent that she had just gotten one of my songs into a feature film. And it was a really big deal because I mostly just did soaps. And the song was called Street of Dreams, Calle de Sueños. And it was a song I wrote for Philip when he died.
Wow.
Right? I was like, oh my gosh. My husband doesn't believe in any like spiritual stuff or like anything, outside of just the natural scientific way of life. So he was like, even I got to say, because I had told him about, the prayer and the crying and all that. And he was like, wow, okay, that happened. That's something. So that should have been the end of it. It really felt like it turned a corner of my grief. It was a wonderful thing. And then a few months later, that film was chosen for the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. And so a year later, I went down to Tribeca to see this film, and my song in the film, which was actually being sung by Emmy Rossum in the title credits, very exciting. And I was like, this is it. Life is going to change and my musical career is about to go up to the next level. And in fact, it was the absolute end of my musical career, because while I was there, I had a ticket to see any other film at Tribeca, but a super limited time frame. And the only available film was The Day My God Died, which is a film about trafficking of very young girls from Nepal into India for sexual exploitation. And when I say I was reluctant about this path, I will tell you very truthfully, I didn't want to go to that film. I felt very resistant. I was like, I'm grieving. I'm still, working through stuff. My kids are super little. And what will I be able to do? Why am I going to go see this super sad, awful film about, sexual exploitation of little ones? And anyway, I went because it was the only available film in my time slot. And so thankful I went, because it just burst open my heart again. And the light and love flowed in for these girls. And I said, I am going to dedicate the rest of my life to doing something for them. And I think if it had been a different film, if it had been like most documentaries, they're so depressing. And because, they just share the really hard things that are going on in the world. It's so important shedding light on them. But this one was different. It did definitely share the tragedy of, 11, 12, 13-year-old girls being trafficked and losing their dreams and their lives in many cases, never going home. But it also showed the hope and resilience and courage of these girls and some of the people helping them. And some of these girls, like this woman, Anita, she had been trafficked at about age 12 after her father died, and, was in brothel in Mumbai for many years, contracted HIV. But she went back, she was eventually rescued and she sent back to Nepal. And she was using the time she had left to work at the border and prevent trafficking from happening to others, because of the insight and intuition she gained having had that happen to herself. So that's the kind of person that was featured in this film. And I later actually got to meet her. She did eventually pass away from AIDS, but before that I got to meet her, and she was as amazing as it seemed in the film. And she was, one of the touchstones. And there were some others, girls who were going back into the brothels and rescuing others and bringing rescue teams, because they knew what to look for. They knew the way that girls would be hidden, and they knew the way that girls would be brainwashed. So they knew how to talk to peers and girls and help them to understand, this is real, this is not, you're not being trafficked again. You can trust these people. I've been there. And it was and is a very powerful part of the story. So anyway, seeing all that, I was like, the love and light flowed into my heart for them. And I just said, I'm going to do this. And, it's not going to be obvious how, because I write soap operas and I live in Cape Cod and I have preschoolers. I've never run an international charity or any charity. I'm never been to India or Nepal. What do I have to offer here? And I was like, we'll figure it out.
That was
And we did.
exactly like the moment that I wanted to like pause at for a second, which is everything you just said. Like your heart burst open. You suddenly feel completely called to this mission, to these girls. And you have like really minus all the love in the world to share and obviously the smarts, but you don't technically have any of the know-how to do this thing. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that moment because we all have those moments where we feel something, but we don't have any idea what to do with it. So in like long and short, what did you do?
So long and short, I asked people who were already doing it what they needed. And I've really tried, and I still try to be humble and know what you don't know, and coming into it from the outside, I certainly didn't want to have this, white savior approach or any kind of savior, like not going to be coming in here with solutions. I'm going to be coming in here with questions and then supporting what's working and building on what's already happening in the field. And that's, really remained my ethos. So the first year I volunteered for another organization called Mighty Nepal that had a chapter in Boston. And I learned and asked and asked, did a lot of research. And whenever anyone who was working in the field would talk to me, I would, ask them what's working, where do you need help? And after a year, the organization I was volunteering with invited me to come and visit their shelter in Kathmandu, another eye-opening, life-changing, transformative experience. And I went and I asked the people at that shelter and a couple other shelters I visited on that trip, what can I do? What can I help you with? Whether it's, fundraising, which is obvious, I thought that would be it. Or, you need me to take out the trash. I don't care. I'll just what's working and where do you need help and support? And all of them said, we really need help and support around finding long-term economic alternatives for the older girls. And by older, I mean rescued at 16 plus. And they, may often found it difficult to go back and start kindergarten again if they hadn't had any kind of earlier education. First of all, there's a lot of trauma, that they had to work through. Second of all, it's really hard to do. Your brain changes and it's just not everyone's thing. And third of all, they were at that point in their life where you're getting ready to move out on your own and you want to have, maybe you want to get married or you want to get your first apartment and get some pots and pans. And they were ready to start establishing independent life. And a lot of them were, young adults, 18, 19, 20 as well. And so, going back to kindergarten wasn't their thing and they had low literacy and a lot of trauma. So it was about trying to find job opportunities for that population. So that's where we started. And we started very, very simply, which was just to take the handicraft products that girls were making at these different shelters and bringing them back to Cape Cod and selling them at house parties. You remember when house parties had their little renaissance, like early 2000s, mid 2000s, or 2005, 2006. And we just happened to kind of hit that moment, which was great. And it turned out to be a great way to break down resistance because like me, most people aren't going to go, they're going to be reluctant or fearful to go see a documentary about such a difficult topic. But hey, it's a house party. There's going to be wine. There's going to be brownies. There's going to be, cheese. Like most women will come, and then we're going to come together. It's going to be these products made by the survivors. And we're going to have a chance to meet, Sarah and learn a little bit about her journey. So we kept it, I guess, very accessible in that way. And it really worked and just kind of kept growing. We kept asking, so over time we realized that the handicrafts weren't actually enough of an income to really transform a survivor's life and give her to be able to move out of the shelter and to be able to live independently and get out of poverty and what they wanted to do, which was pull their mom or their sister out. And they need to have a higher income. So then we realized that we needed to train in other kinds of jobs that could have a higher income. So we've done different things over the years, but one of them was goldsmithing. And we've trained about 75 women in that. And that actually provides them a very good income that allows them to, live independently, support others, and become taking a leadership role in the family and community. And we just continue to explore all different kinds of professional opportunities, from baking to computer programming and photography, and anything in between that, women and girls want to do professionally. Building on that, we realized, we do have this large population of younger survivors and also even some of the older teens who do want to go the formal education route. So we started our education program, which has actually been one of our largest programs. And we provide education and a full circle of services that support that, because you can't be successful in education if you're living on the pavement in a red light area and you don't have breakfast, so we're really addressing the need for shelter, the mental health needs, teaching people, to be able to understand their legal and human rights around this, really addressing trauma on a multitude of different levels, whilst providing basics like food, nutritious food and a safe place to study. Like we have these resource centers in the red light areas. And this is for kids whose moms are still in prostitution. Their moms were probably trafficked. They would be trafficked too. They have a 90% chance of being trafficked if they're growing up there. And we built these centers where they can come from early in the morning to quite late at night and be able to have a safe place to study and then receive all these services from tutoring, financial literacy, all of it that allows them to be successful in life, to remain safe, to protect themselves. We've got about 350 kids in that program. Just over the years, we kept asking, and, we asked local partners and organizations in the field, but we also, as the girls grew older and our relationships with them deepened, asked them, what do you need? What do you want? And sometimes the answer was surprising, but we always tried to adapt and respond to that. And that's brought us to where we are today.
Wow. So I imagine, you're talking about kind of like a growing web of needs and resources over time as you started to understand what the needs really were. So I imagine that you're also creating relationships with other groups, other people on the ground, as well as probably here in the States, like where all these resources can come together to create what's needed. It's not, I am imagining that it can't just be like you and what you've created, like you've now kind of created a web of resource.
100%. I'm obsessed about collaboration. And I actually think whether it's trafficking or any other, major serious social problem, no one person's going to fix it. No one organization is going to fix it, even if it's a big, giant organization, but certainly not, smaller grassroots ones. There's different needs and people have to come together to, address them. And for us, we've done almost everything, really everything in close partnership with local organizations, like that red light program, with a group that worked in that community for a while and had developed, relationships with the parents. Another program is in the slum community. And there's local partners working in all those areas. We don't conduct rescues. We work with groups that conduct the rescues, and we start working with survivors at the point of rescue. Other people work on their legal cases and helping them to, get their legal rights taken care of, or repatriation. So there's all these different kind of ways of approaching it. And I guess that's what gives me hope, for this issue and other issues that people want to get involved in, that, there are many, many approaches needed. So whatever you've got to bring to the table, you could find a place where that's the need and where your passion and gifts meet the world's need. There's going to be a different place. And I've seen approaches where at first I was like, that's, I felt skeptical. And they end up working for some girls. So let's, I now know I don't compare myself like, oh, those people are better than me. They're doing better. That's such a waste of time. Or there's going to be girls who needs are met by our approach and by other people's in their approach. It's like, we need it all.
Right. Well, we're all like human beings and we all vary in what works for us and, what needs are satisfied. I'm curious, Sarah, because, we're obviously spending so much time right now looking at, here in the States, we're looking at COVID. Well, around the world, we're looking at COVID. We're looking at the election, politics, all of these issues. But we're talking about the lives of girls on the other side of the world. Why does this matter so much? Like, why should we be paying attention to this? Why should we be thinking about supporting the betterment of these lives?
I think that we always have to pay attention to the most vulnerable among us. And there's a saying like, if one man is enslaved, then no one is free. And I feel like, the most vulnerable people in our world right now are girls. And I don't think we can progress as a society as half a people. And I think we have to address all the people, the women and the men, the people of color and the European people. Like, we have to move forward together as an entire society, or I feel like we're going to stay stuck and we can't move forward at all. So I think it really does, it serves us all when we see ourselves as a global community and when we come together to move forward. COVID it's been hard on everyone, of course, like challenges right around my neighborhood in my town. But for people who are already vulnerable, it's been devastating. I think for The girls that live in shelters, they've been okay because the shelters, had some food stockpiled, had some money in the bank. But for girls who live with their parents in the slums and red light areas, people didn't even have a can of food or a bag of rice when this started. Lockdown was announced very suddenly. People didn't have any food, like never mind worrying about toilet paper or, it was like zero food. And there was an extreme risk of starvation. And immediately, parents started sending girls out to beg. I mean, they had no choice. They were just in desperate situations. So we are very thankful that our donors and community really rallied, and we were able to provide quite a bit of emergency relief to prevent, that from continuing and prevent anyone from starving or being trafficked. So thankful for that. But we're not a relief organization. It's not, normally what we would do. We're into this long-term, like deep approach. So I think, but the need was and is alarming. Families that were living on maybe $3 a day for the whole family of 6, and now it's $1. Like imagine, we're already so marginal, and then what little you have is gone. And then there's this huge, it was terrible. There's this big typhoon that came through, or cyclone, sorry. And I think it's the same thing as a hurricane. I'm still trying to figure it out. But anyway, this big weather event came through, and these kids were watching like their 2 possessions floating away, down the alley on top of COVID. So, I do truly feel that if we don't act and continue to act, and take a strong response to this, that we're going to lose, some of the ground that we've gained, both for, us and for our girls and other organizations and for other very vulnerable people. So I think it's critical that we act on it, but, for the world, but also for ourselves. Like, I don't think we're going to be well if we don't address wellness globally. And in terms of the election and COVID, there's some actions you can take, and by all means do take them. But there's also a sense that with some of these issues that we don't have a lot of control. And that's, very scary and very hard for us to admit, the standing fact that we don't control most of what goes on in the world and in life. So I feel like by taking things that we can control and taking action on them, it heals us and it helps us move forward. So, you can be on social media all day railing against, things that are distressing in the world, or you can, go work for a candidate you believe in, or, work at the local food bank, or get involved in our organization. You can take steps that you can control. And that feels more empowering and more healing to me than living in a constant elevated state of, distress and rage.
I love that. I can only imagine that by doing this work so full force, by going to these places and being, face to face with the reality, but most importantly, by establishing relationships with these young women over time, that you've experienced profound learning, growth, healing that have just become part of you. So I would love to understand and hear more about that.
I have. I mean, I feel like, you said it at the beginning of this discussion, when you dive in and walk alongside people in these hard situations, like you're going to get as much out of it as they are. It is so profoundly true. And for me, it has been extraordinary. The joy that I've experienced and witnessed and been a part of is like nothing I ever could have imagined before doing this. Because when people have been in such a very, 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 very hard and dark place, and then they come out of that, the joy that they experience is greater than the average joy. And I wrote a book about it called This Is No Ordinary Joy, because it really is like kind of in balance to the hard and painfulness. The joy is also higher, because you've maybe experienced the full scope of it. So I've loved that. And I have loved being able to be trusted by people, even after all the betrayal that they have experienced, that they still are able to love, that they're still able to trust again, that when you do enter into their life and prove yourself as a, trustworthy and caring person, that profound relationships, can and do come out of that. One of my very most special, they're all so special, but someone that I'm especially proud of right now is Anjali. And Anjali is a Nepali young woman. She was trafficked at age 12 from a small village in Nepal into a brothel in Calcutta. And she was there for a couple of years and then rescued. And I met her very shortly after she was rescued. And we've been walking together ever since. She is a daughter to me in every sense of the word. And we've just written a book together. And it's called Standing in the Way. It's coming out January 11th, Human Trafficking Awareness Day. And, she, unlike many of our girls, really don't want to publicly share their story. And, there's a lot of stigma around it. And also they need to focus on moving forward and what's ahead for them and not what's behind. Anjali's a little different because she wants to go back to her village and open a school and a trafficking prevention program there. And in order to do that, she feels that, she kind of needs to get it out there and be pretty open and honest and public about it so that, she can raise money for the project, but also when she goes back into the village to take a strong stand, like, this is who I am, this is what happened, and I am a survivor, and I'm not going to let this happen in the next generation. So through the, months of quarantine, that was my project. And I'm so lucky. Like, it was so profound and it was so fun and it was so meaningful, to be able to walk, find out all about, like, every little thing about her life before this happened and her incredible perspective that she has today, the wisdom, as healing for me, as it was for her and hopefully for the people who read it.
Wow. How did you execute a book together? Because I'm imagining she lives on the other side of the world.
She lives in Kathmandu. She's in college right now in her third year studying education. We Zoomed the heck out of it. I mean, we just Zoomed, and that was fun too. Like, I recorded them all because, I transcribed them. So I interviewed her many, many times, and you can sort of see like my look deteriorating as COVID continued. My hair goes longer and stragglier. It's sweaty, just like summer comes, but it was really fun. So I interviewed her extensively. She didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about the time in the brothel. Understandably, but she had shared things over the years with me, and I had those. And I also used, other girls that I talked to and my own knowledge of the situation to kind of pull that section together. But it's mostly not about what happened there. It's mostly about the vulnerabilities that led to her being trafficked, the circumstances, the root causes, and then the healing journey, what happened after, and, her going on to develop this beautiful dream. And so we also interviewed about 8 people who were involved in rescuing her and involved in, sheltering her and helping to return to Nepal. And so their stories are woven in as well. Because we wanted to show too that, like, wherever you're hitting this from, some of those people are Nepali, some are Indian, one's American. I'm, American. So, like, just wherever you're coming to this from, that you can play a role in someone's life. There are many different ways, as I said before, to enter into this. And all these people did. And so they're the angels kind of, weaving through this. And then, the end is her, getting married and having a little baby and buying the land. She bought the land this summer for the school. So it's moving forward. It's happening.
Wow.
I love that. I take more pride in that than in anything I've done, because it's like just being able to, like, help one of these girls to accomplish her vision. It's incredible. And I get to do it every day in different ways. One of our girls, as you mentioned earlier, got to interview Malala and Michelle Obama for International Day of the Girl. And her dream is to be a photojournalist. She really wants to come to the United States to study. And I feel like, getting that byline in Teen Vogue is, a nice step on her journey. It was huge for her, and it was huge for us. And another one of our girls took the photographs, and she got a photo credit in Vogue for that. So they do amazing things every day. And for someone else, it's simpler. I just moved out of the shelter and I moved into my first apartment, and, we get to go over and see their apartment. It looks just like anyone's first apartment. You know what I mean? Like, stuff's on the floor, and, they're figuring it all out. It's awesome.
I think what you point at when you say that is like, it looks like anyone's apartment. It's like, we forget living the largely, not that trafficking does not happen in the US, it does, but we live such privileged lives, most of us, in ways like we can't even totally see, that we forget that these young girls, like, as you said before, we are one of them. They are one of us. Like, we could be them. And so, yeah, they are just like, quote, regular girls, and they should be allowed to be. And they just happen to, thank God, be able to become extraordinary through this amazing support that, you and these other organizations are able to give them. So I just applaud you. I'm curious, Sarah, like, before we start to wrap it up, giving us maybe like 3 concise bits that you've woven into your life, your wellness, your self-care, your mindset that you have learned from these girls because they're so powerfully resilient. So I can only imagine how that must rub off on you in your daily practices and daily ways of processing your life in the world.
So it definitely has. It's like given me a whole new, spiritual practice or perspective. So it's hard to pick just three, but one of them is the biggest thing is making a conscious decision to leave the past behind. And obviously it doesn't mean you don't work through it. You don't, process it. You don't feel your grief and loss that they obviously have a lot of, and, it needs to be periodically addressed, but they are not dropping anchor there. And, I've seen remarkable recoveries. And I would say that like 95% of the girls go on to make a really good recovery, in their mental health and in their life, and able to rebuild a good, healthy life if they're given, these supports. The ones that don't, it is an inability it's that you're still in the brothel in your mind and you're using yourself over and over and over again by reliving it. And it's for us who have had a much lesser levels of trauma, it's still really hard not to get stuck in past resentments, right? It's like, this is a journey, and a process that I still struggle with. And like, oh, this happened, what, this person, why do they like me? And, kind of like whatever this person did or said is nothing compared to me saying it to myself like 5,000 times over the next years, So what I've really learned from them is like, make the decision to forgive, not for them, but for you, and make the decision to not hold on to a hot coal, which is, holding on to resentment, not to ruminate. So Anjali says that when she starts kind of running, maybe having imagery that's really disturbing that's running around her head, she like literally shakes her head, her body, like shake it off, walk outside, move into a different room, get yourself out of that mindset. Don't spiral into it and make that conscious decision day after day. Look up, not down, look forward, not back. If you're in a counseling session, and you need to process it, if you're having a moment, you need to grieve it, of course, do it. I'm not saying that, but don't drop anchor there. That is number one. And another one is what stands in the way becomes the way. And that is from Marcus Aurelius, and also is inspired the title of the book I wrote with Anjali, standing in the way. The things that happen, let's just say in her case, these terrible things happen. We wish they wouldn't happen. We would wish they would not have happened to her or to anyone, but they did. And, what can you take from that? Like, it doesn't mean, everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that, but let's find a reason. Let's make it worth it. Let's, take something that was horrible and turn it into something beautiful. And that's what she's doing with her project and what other girls are doing in each of their own individual ways. Like maybe through being trafficked, some new opportunities came their way, for education and professional that they wouldn't have had, and obviously it doesn't equal it or anything like that, but it's just, let's allow things that have happened. Let's find if there's something that we can take strength from and have that become our way forward. And finally, I use this a lot. Like, let's see what love can do. Let's not give in to despair, with COVID, with our election, with trafficking, with hunger, with gender-based violence of all kinds. This is a situation I've seen when you shine a light on it, when you intervene, responds really positively, and great change is possible. So I refuse to be hopeless. People are like, well, there are millions of girls. Okay, but let's knock them down. Let's knock it one by one here. Let's see what love can do in this situation, in this person's trauma, in this social trauma. And let's give it a minute and absolutely not give in to despair. Nothing and no one is beyond help.
Wow. So powerful. Thank you for that wisdom. I think we can all benefit from it. And I think we know deep down that this is not just ideas, but this is truth. So, wow, I'm so honored to have been able to listen to your learning and the work you're doing in the world. Before we go, Sarah, please tell us how listeners can follow the organization, contribute, get involved, and anything else you want us to be tuned into, whether it's the book or anything else.
Thank you for asking. Please engage with us on social media, and it's HerFuture Coalition or at HerFuture Coalition or HerFuture. You can find it. Our website is www.herfuture, www.herfuturecoalition.org. You can find out a lot more information there. The book, Standing in the Way, is coming out in January on Amazon. And I would just invite you that if you felt, touched by anything we talked about today, and whether it's our organization and this issue or something else that you've been really called to do it, step into it, dive in, and the next step's going to be revealed for you, just like it was for me and for all of us involved in this organization.
Thank you. You're truly a model of what it means to step in. So I'm honored. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing your story today with us.
Thanks for deeply listening.
You got it. And listeners, thank you for deeply listening. I do not take your time for granted. I value the time that you invest in yourself, which I hope is what this podcast provides you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it. And as always, I always appreciate 5-star ratings and perhaps even a little bit of commentary over on Apple iTunes as to why you love the podcast. If you happen to stumble upon this episode and you didn't subscribe yet, do so, because then you'll never miss an episode. And one last thing is that if you are not a subscriber to my newsletter, you should be, because you'll actually get bonus content, extra bits of conversation with my guests that are a little bit more personal. And you'll get to know them more and have a few laughs, a little bit more insight. So if you haven't yet, head over to the website, goingbeyondmovement.com, and plop in your email, and you'll start to get access to some of that fun extra content. So until next time, you guys, take care of yourself, and we'll see you whenever the next time is. Next week, I hope. Bye.